Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Thank you all for coming. MashaAllah, it's so fantastic to see all you people here, MashaAllah. Again, I'd like to thank the special guests for coming today. It's an honor to be here with you. And MashaAllah, it's still 8:10. The bathrooms are to the right. And there's a beautiful booth with batik. So please check it out, inshallah. So settle in. If you need anything, please let the Ambara group know. Ambara faces, hands up. There you go, our beautiful team. So if you need anything, please let me know. We'll be of service to you, inshallah. All right, be with you in 20 minutes. Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Excuse me, can everyone please move to the front just a little bit to give some space? If you see any empty spaces, just one seat forward, that would be great. Thank you.
When I'll just grab it from here.
Bismillah. Hey, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Again, thank you all for coming. It's a pleasure to see so many happy, smiling faces this time of night. Good job, everyone comes over. Well, my name is Raida, and I'll be your MC for tonight. Now, before we begin, a few housekeeping rules. Please remember to switch off your mobile phones or put them on silent. That's really important, as we all know, and can be very difficult. Bathrooms are to the right, over there. And now for the proceedings. Alhamdulillah, today's event will begin with a short poetry recitation by Baraka Blue, after which Professor Dr. Tatiana will begin with her talk, Islam in the Malay World, the Forgotten History and Contemporary Confusion. Dr. Umar's talk will follow that, entitled Her Story, Prominent Women in Islam and Nusantara. The event will end with a Q&A session, so please write down your questions on a slip of paper, or you can always go up to the microphone at the end and ask away. Now, on to introductions. Who is Mbara? We are an organization that seeks to promote art and beauty that expresses truth. We seek to honor our beautiful Nusantara heritage through batik, architecture, literature, and history. Please visit our booth outside for some beautiful examples. Now, a very big thank you to Universal, our collaborator for this talk. Universal is a non-profit organization that celebrates inclusiveness, spirituality, and entrepreneurship. I'd also like to thank a very generous anonymous donor who, mashallah, has given so much and does not want to be named. We dua for him anyways, subhanAllah. So we are all delighted to have Baraka Blue among us today. He is not new to Malaysia, and neither is Malaysia new to him. Baraka Blue is a poet, lyricist, musician, and teaching artist. He recently released his latest book of poetry titled Empty and the Ocean. Please everyone, welcome Baraka Blue to the stage.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Is this thing on? Alhamdulillah, it's a great honor to be here amongst our teachers and our elders, our brothers and our sisters in Malaysia. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah, in relation to the topic, I wanted to recite a poem that is entitled To Mothers. Do we have any mothers in the crowd? Yes, wow, it's full of mothers, a lot of mothers. And brothers, if you're feeling left out, do we have any children of mothers here? Alhamdulillah, okay, we're all here. And obviously the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam spoke about the importance of mothers, and it's something that we all know. And of course we know that Ar-Rahman is a name of Allah, and Ar-Rahim from the same root means the womb. And that's a very special and powerful connection. So obviously in speaking about her story and the important women in our lives and in our history, also the Bismillah. The wives of the beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam are called the mothers of the believers. So this is called To Mothers. To those mothers who buttered sandwiches and lit love's lanterns when sweet dreams turned to nightmares, and cloaked us in radiant safety net, bear hugs under covers, and sacrificed many a night's sleep like a coat over a puddle so our pillows stayed dry, and evaporated tears when we would cry, and smiled at the clouds till they bowed gracefully to a blue sky. To those mothers who allowed faces to hide in pant legs when we were shy, from strangers or neighbors or distant family members who just came to say hi, and who explained with true amazement the transformation of a caterpillar to a butterfly. To those mothers who peanut buttered sandwiches and read books over and over again until she could noose Dr. Seuss. But when that please mommy please, eyes bleed, mouth squeeze, chubby cheeks, gap teeth, her heart melts and she reads just one more time. And those words become sweet in her mouth because that warm ball of innocent trust in her curls up on her shoulder, and she knows no sound sweeter than hearing him breathe. And when the breathing gets deep, she looks deep into that glowing innocence, and her heart weeps with overwhelming mercy. For she is accessing the feeling nearest to God a human being can experience. Love, unconditional mercy, compassionate love. True, selfless, gentle, nurturing, life-giving, soul-cleansing, spirit-raising love. For those mothers who buttered sandwiches and taught young boys in a society so sick and deprived of love to love, and young girls to find love deep within themselves, and watered seeds to full-flown flowers, unfolding petals gracefully in concrete habitats, and old rusty ramshackle shacks in any desert or countryside, anywhere and everywhere that mothers butter sandwiches, or split coconuts, or make curries, or milk goats, or steam rice, or warm bottles on stoves or microwaves, or hang clothes on lines in the sunshine. This is for those mothers who raise children to be lovers, hog all the covers, who go to sleep last making school lunches, and wake up first making breakfast and assembling outfits, who struggle and strain and bear the pain and don't complain, but smile. This is mothers who had to be fathers and mothers, and had to hide tears because there was no time for her own when she was wiping away everyone else's. This is for mothers who never knew selfish, and never felt they deserved a congratulations, a celebration, or a high station, or a standing ovation. But you do, all of you. And this is for mothers who bore abuse, both physical and mental, from men who had mothers too, who raised them like you, but forgot what you taught. And this is my pledge: I will not forget. For every woman is a potential mother, and is a daughter who was an innocent ball of trust, who was held by a mother who buttered sandwiches if she was lucky. And if not, all the more reason to treat her like a mother would treat her who loved her and peanut butter sandwiches. And this is for my mother, the one I owe love to, because you are the one I know love through. You are the closest thing I've ever known to purity, to sincere, overwhelming, overpowering, unconditional love and mercy overflowing from your heart through your eyes when you look at me. Everything good in me is from you. And it is such an understatement to say, but it is the most powerful thing mere language can convey. I love you. And I love you all too. Thank you so much. God bless you.
MashaAllah, that was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing.
Clip this somewhere near us. That's here. Okay. All right.
And that's my baby. Okay, moving on. I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Professor Dr. Tatiana Denisova is a professor in the Center for Advanced Studies on Islam, Science and Civilization, CASIS, University of Technology in Malaysia. Dr. Denisova is an expert in the history of the Malay world, historiography, and historical sources. She obtained a PhD from Moscow Institute of Oriental Studies in 1998 on the Malay Chronicle Tufat al-Nafis as a source of the history and historiography of Johor in the 16th to 19th century. Dr. Denisova has extensive teaching experience and has worked as guest researcher, senior fellow, lecturer, and editor. Dr. Denisova is a member of a number of academic and professional organizations and has published a good number of books and articles on the Malay world and history in general. Please welcome Professor Dr. Tatiana to the stage. Thank you.
Technique is not my field anymore. Is it clear? Okay. Ke belakang sedikit boleh. Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm very happy to be here.
in this beautiful meeting to remind you a little bit about the history. I'm not going to tell you stories, yeah, but I will remind you about the history, which is according to Herodotus, yeah, some investigation of the past based on inquiry. So I can see here a lot of guests of Malaysia, and I think that is why my first, wait, this one I think, yeah, my first slide will be about to remind you that this part of the world is very special part of the human civilization. It's not some kind of forgotten part, which one legendary country, which one disappear in the ocean of time and history, yeah. But Southeast Asia and Malay world as a being part of it, yeah, play a very important role in the human civilization. This region was known since very early times with many different places, yeah. Yavadvipa and Malaya Dvipa, Savarna Dvipa, Savarna Bhumi in Indian sources, Agrir, Chris, Golden Hersones and Latin and Greek sources, Shilifushi, Sanfotsi, Kolo, Tunsun, and so on in Chinese sources. Zabach, Srizuba, Java, Javi, Kalak, Kakulak, and so on in old Arabian sources. According to one of the very important Orientalists, Sir Ronald Braden, it was already some cultural and commercial relationship between Nusantara and Mesopotamia already starting from 15th century before Common Era. For example, the legendary country, legendary land, Saphir or Ophir, from which one King Solomon used to get his gold and treasures, yeah, he identified with Suvarna Dvipa, means Sumatra, and it means golden island or golden land. The spread of Islam led to the fundamental changes, not only in the religious, but also in the intellectual and social life of Malay-Indonesian archipelago. And still, even it is like this, the main questions of history of Islam here still not clarified properly. Who brought Islam here? Where Islam come from? When Islam began to spread in Malay world? Still the matter of discussion. Among main prejudice about the history and, of Islam in Malay archipelago, and also about the contribution of Islam, I can list like this. Islam came from India or Persia or China. I think a lot of you was learning in the school like this, something like this, yeah? Islam in the Malay world is not a pure Islam like in Middle East, but some syncretic religion, some mixture of traditional beliefs, Hindu-Buddhistic tradition and Islamic term. Very popular opinion. Islam spread by traders. Until now, I think majority of you think it is like this. Islam come to Malay world after 14th century. It's also a prejudice, it's not true. Islam is something foreigner for Malay culture. Islam doesn't change anything in the Malay-Indonesian archipelago. And one of the very important prejudice is the last one. Malay Islamic historiography or historical writing cannot be accepted as a truthful source of the study of the history of Malay-Indonesian archipelago. Why it is very important to put your attention on the last part, yeah? Because we can find a lot of evidence about the history of Islam in all Malay texts. But if you don't really believe that these sources are reliable, trustful, yeah, so you will just avoid these sources, yeah, and you will still continue to follow the prejudice. Main theories how Islam come to Malay-Indonesian archipelago is like this. Islam come from India and spread by Indian traders. Islam came from Persia and spread by Persian traders or missionaries, means Shiites. Islam came from China and spread by traders or sailors like Cheng Ho, for example. And Islam came even from Arabia but spread for Arabs, traders and sailors. Yeah? And the last one, which one brilliantly proven by Professor Said Muhammad Nabi Balatas, Islam spread by Arabian Mumaliks. This guy, Snoukhur Granier, the author of the most popular idea that Islam come from India and spread by Indians. Why it's happened like that? Why this theory becomes so popular until now? Until now, people used to teach it in the school like this. Snoukhur Granier was a very famous Orientalist, and he was invited by colonial administration in the very end of 19th century to the Malay world, to the Malaya, to help to solve one very important problem. In the end of 19th century, beginning of 20th century, one big war was going on in Aceh. Yeah, Aceh people was fighting with Dutch people, firstly because of paper, monopoly of paper, and secondary influenced by ulama, which one just came from Mecca and Medina. They begin fight for their independence and for their rights. Yeah, and they become so strong, and until Dutch almost was fallen down. And they invite him and try to find a way how to separate ulama from local people. And he did very not beautiful but very brilliant from his point of view decision. He said to Malays, "No, you are Muslims." Before that, people even was not sure that Malays are actually Muslims. Yeah. But you are good Muslims. You are not that terrible Muslims like in Arabian world. Yeah? Because you are very nice and very soft, because you got Islam from India. And this Islam goes through the seeds of Indian culture. And that is why you not need to follow these ulama who come out from Mecca and Medina, so they cannot teach you anything because they are strangers. Yeah, and finally, yeah, this propaganda separate people, and Achenese people fell down. I understand why he did it, but I don't understand why until now in our schools people teach like this. Yeah, this is my question to you, not your question to me. The theory of Chinese origin of Islam. This is what people, the follower of this theory, used to refer to the existence of early settlements of Muslims in Canton and Guangzhou, the existence of early epigraphic artifacts in China, and they used to refer to some Walisonga who, according to them, originated from China. All these arguments, it's not true. Majority Muslim population from 7th century, yeah, which one used to stay in Canton and Guangzhou used to be Arabs. Many of them used to be Quraysh. Many of them used to be Sayyid's. And when they got problems with the Chinese government during Yong and Ming dynasty, they have to run away from China, otherwise they can be killed. They come to Kedah and continue their preaching in this part of the world. including Walisongo, who all of them used to be from Said's origin. According to theory of Persian origin of Islam in the Malay-Indonesian archipelago, it could be like this, according to the follower of this theory, because Pasay derived from toponym Persia, very questionable. The first missionaries of Islam in Perlak were Shiites, no proofs, very questionable. Malay literature influenced by Persian literature, that's it's true, but influence of literature doesn't mean Dakwa, doesn't mean Islamization. Malay rulers of Malacca used the title Shah. We don't know actually the origin of this title, Sheikh or Shah. And anyway, it is already Malacca time. Yeah, it is already 15th century. In the Malay world have been widely spread ideas of Ibn al-Arabi and Jili, and means all of them originated from Persia, and that is also not true. Even Jilani, yeah, come out from contemporary Azerbaijan, but they all wrote in Arabic and was considered as a great Arabic Muslim scholars. Yeah, and some sorry, this one I don't know how to do. Anyway, this I would like to refer to Prof. Alata's book, Historical Fact and Fiction, and read his interpretation, yeah, of the Islamization of Malay-Indonesian archipelago. From my interpretation of the way in which the first establishment of an Islamic kingdom in the Malay world is derived from the earliest Malay sources, it's become clear that in contradiction to the position taken by European and other like-minded historians, Islam was introduced in a very early date in a manner of planned directly from its land of origin and not from India or Persia. Its first king received his instrument of office and legitimation from the Sharif of Mecca as instructed by Khalid. It was nowhere reported in Hikayat Raja Pasay that Indians or Persians were the missionaries that spread Islam in the Malay world. Moreover, Islam that was brought and disseminated was original Arab Islam and not transformed Islam that had first to pass through the sieve of Indian and Persian, means Shiite culture and interpretation. Traders and transmitters of the literary and artistic creation was not missionaries of the religion. The religion initial missionaries were from the noble families Ashrafs, yeah, among the Arabs, learned men of spiritual discernment, some of whom had directly from Arabia, some from Persia, and some via India and Indochina, and some looked and dressed like Indians and Persians, being easily mistaken from them. And the spread of Islam by these Arabs missionaries in the Malay world was not a haphazard matter, and disorganized sporadic affair carried on by merchants and traders and port authorities, and even by Sufi orders conceived somewhat as a trade guilds, whose role have been exaggerated. European historian of the Malay archipelago, comprising prehistorian, ethnologists, archaeologists, and other, brilliantly elaborated their cogent finding in this, and with such diligent, inspiring scholarship that evokes due praise. We must sincerely acknowledge their wonderful intellectual contribution and affirm what is true in their interpretation of our history, which they have gradually set and irrevocably agreed among themselves. Regarding the questions of who brought Islam to the Malay world, he mentioned that it's actually obvious fact that Islam comes through the trade routes. Yeah, but this obvious fact easy jump to the conclusion that traders brought Islam to the world, and this is not true. When Islam came to the Malay world, it is two main opinions One is that Islam come after 14th century, and second that Islam begin to disseminate it here in 7th, 8th century. Yeah, the difference is more than 600 years. Why it is happened so big difference of opinion? One of the answers to this question we can find in the works of Sir Thomas Arnold, very important and very interesting scholar from USA, who used to work a lot in India, and who was a teacher of Iqbal, yeah, and who used to work in Aligarh University. And according to him, the Islamization of Malay-Indonesian archipelago to have two main phases. Yeah, the first is the first contact with Muslims, Muslim missionaries from 7th to 12th century, and the second one from 12th century to the modern time, his modern time. Yeah, this is emergence of Islamic states in society, which one acknowledge Islam as the official religion. According to Fatimi, yeah, the Islamization was a peaceful process, and that is why it took time to be mature. And that is his, you can see here, his periodization of the spreading of Islam in Malay-Indonesian archipelago. Provalatas, in his book about general theory of Islamization of Malay-Indonesian archipelago, give the periodization of the intellectual Islamization of the Malay-Indonesian archipelago. He divides intellectual Islamization and Islamization of knowledge in Malay-Indonesian archipelago to three main phases. First, from 13th to 15th century, this was a conversion of body, in which one people just begin to follow Islam, begin to learn Ibadat and Sharia without proper and deep understanding of the concept of Kuruhid and so on. And that is why he named this phase as a conversion of the body. The second phase, from 15th to 18th century, he named the conversion of the spirit. And you know, this time in the Malay-Indonesian archipelago appears a lot of beautiful, brilliant scholars. Ar-Raniri, Hamzah Fansuri, Abdul Rauf Ibn Sinkel, and many others, yeah? And these local people already, yeah? They wrote original kitabs on most important part of philosophy, metaphysics of Islam. And that is why Provalatas mentioned this phase, second phase, the conversion of the spirit. The third phase, he named as a westernization, and it looks maybe strange, because we used to talk about westernization as if it is something negative. He used this word because they claim, Western people claim, that this is the one, they are the one who bring over here the spirit of individualism, rationalism, and intellectualism. Yeah, but when they come already here, this main concept and mass idea was a long time already settled here. And this influence of the Western intellectual tradition give new move to the traditional Islamic intellectualism and rationalism. In economical independence had led to the decline of life, to the crisis of national identity, as well as to the breakdown of the historical consciousness. Colleagues from ISTEC, Prof. Muhammad Nurwan Daud, Prof. Zaini, Prof. Al-Paslan, and many others continue to reconstruct the system of fundamental Islamic education based on proper worldview. History and historiography is one of the significant elements of this worldview. It has been considered by Provalatas as fardu ain for intellectuals. the implementation of the proper Islamic worldview into the contemporary Muslim society is one of the main targets.
To Queen Elizabeth. And you have other great women of Singapore and of other parts of Malaysia and of Indonesia and elsewhere. And I wish I could tell you their stories, but unfortunately I need to learn that story myself. What I would like to talk about is famous women in Islamic history more generally. And I prepared a CD set on this topic which you can get online. It's called Famous Women in Islam. It is 14 different CDs. Each of them was a lecture of about an hour and a half. And I began to put that together shortly after I returned to the United States in the year 2000. And I did that because of the fact that it is imperative that women play a dynamic role in our society. Here in Nusantara, you actually have a very vibrant tradition of women taking active part in that. And this is part of your tradition, and this is something to be valued and to be studied properly. But in Islamic history, women have continually played very important roles. And that has been eclipsed in relatively recent history, especially in, let's say, the last 200 years, which has been a difficult time for us. In doing the CD set Famous Women in Islam, I wanted not to focus on the companions, the women among the companions. And maybe this was wrong on my part to do that, because we love the companions and we love the mothers of the believers among the companions. But I felt that usually when we talk about famous women in Islamic history, it is about the companions, Khadija, Aisha, Salama. And so I felt it's good to show the world that there is a rich tradition of famous women after that as well, and that goes on for hundreds and hundreds of years. And that tradition often appears strong in certain areas and among certain peoples. For example, among the Turks and among the Mongols. The Mongols will come into Islam in the wake of the Mongol conquests, and they will establish states like those of Mughal India. And there women will often have a very dominant role. Nur Jahan, for example, the great empress of Mughal India, was a powerful woman. And so I thought that this is something good to remind ourselves of. Dr. Tatiana is a historian, and she talks about the importance of history. I also believe in the importance of history. History tells us who we are by telling us what we were. And in West Africa, the West Africans will say, the world is old, but the future springs from the past. It's important to know our past. In Islamic law, it is fard kifaya. It is a societal obligation for us to educate our women just as we educate our men. And it is a societal obligation that we produce Muslim women scholars, just as we produce male scholars. And this has generally been the case in Islamic history. Some scholars would say that it has not been as common as it should have been. In other words, that the proportions between the male scholars and the female scholars was hardly equal. And they attribute that sometimes to the male prerogative that was instilled in a lot of traditional societies, and certain limitations upon women and upon their movements and their access to teachers. Yet whatever the reality was, there were many great Muslim women in all fields, in fields of education, in fields of poetry, in artistic production, in politics, in war, and virtually in every walk of life. And it's really important to bring this to light. There are a number of books that have been written on this topic, and they're of great value. A lot of our contemporary Muslim scholars who emphasize the role of women in our religion and our history emphasize the fact that a society in which women are not empowered properly and they're not educated properly is like a human body that's not fully healthy. And they often compare that society to a human body that has only one functioning lung. So it's not going to be as strong as it should be. It won't be able to withstand the kind of challenges that it faces. So it's very important for us to understand that, and I feel also that for us today, as we develop our Muslim communities, and as we develop our institutions in particular, we must pay a lot of attention to what many of us are already doing, especially those of you in Malaysia, and no doubt in other countries in the region. And that is paying careful attention to the education of women as well as men, and producing women scholars as well as men. And again, I don't know as much about your society as I would like to know, but I do know that in Malaysia, women often have very dynamic and very important positions. And I think that that's a great thing. In any case, the history of famous women in Islam is a way of inspiring ourselves by example and showing ourselves precedents in the past that are meaningful for us in the future. As we said before, if we look at the companions, there you have many very notable women. We have, of course, our mother Khadija, radiallahu anha. It's been said that Islam began, as the conjunction of a husband and a wife. It began in the arms of a woman. This is what some people have said, meaning Khadija. The role that she played in that is well known to us all. Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, she is an heir of the Prophet in every way. And the knowledge that she received and the knowledge that she transmitted makes her among the most knowledgeable of all of the companions, male and female, in every way. Salama, the wife of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is a counterpart of Aisha. And there are many things in our history which actually go back to her. For example, in the issue of theology, one of the important matters is that how do we understand those verses in the Quran or those hadith that refer to God in terms that appear to be anthropomorphic? We call these verses mutashabihat, verses that draw apparent similarities between God and creation. And we have a famous statement from Imam Malik in Medina, which is typical of the theologians of that early period, in which a particular visitor to Medina from Iraq asked him, Ar-Rahmanu ala al-Arsh istawa, that the most merciful has taken the throne, or he sits on the throne, to translate it very literally. Is positioned on the throne. So what does that mean? God doesn't have a body. God is not smaller than the throne is not bigger than him. So he asked that question, and he asked it as if like, what does this verse mean? As if he were even questioning the validity of the verse. And Imam Malik responded by saying, al-istiwa'u ma'aloom, that this word istiwa, taking the throne, is well known. Wal kayfu majhul, but the how of it, the way, what that means literally is unknown. In one transmission, he says, al-kayfu ghayru ma'qul, that the kayf of it, the how of it, cannot be perceived by intellect. Well, imanu bihi wajib, and to believe in it is obligatory, and to ask about it in the way that this person has, which is very impolite, also is an innovation. This is a brilliant statement, and it embodies in many ways the position of the early Salaf of this ummah, especially in these matters. But the oldest statement that we have of this nature is actually from Salama, that she actually is on record as being the first we know of who actually said that. So this again shows, the centrality of the woman's voice, even in that theological tradition. In Medina also, the women took part in the military operations of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And here, one of the things that's been noticed is that often the predominance of women in society is a function of things like their economic role. So if you're in a society like that of Medina, which was agrarian, where the men and women both work in the fields and they both produce, the men and women will be relatively equal in society. And in fact, the Medinese women, the Ansar, were known for being dominant. They were known also for dominating their husbands. And if the economic roles are different, for example, in Mecca, those who did earn a livelihood generally did it by trade. And that trade is an overland trade in which women usually will not take direct part. We know that Khadija, Allah be pleased with her, that she was wealthy and that she invested in caravans. And she outfitted the caravans. And we know that she once entrusted the Prophet ﷺ to be with one of her caravans and to overlook it. The Prophet was not a merchant, by the way. And I find it offensive when people say that he was. He took this one journey. He went with the caravan and he oversaw it. And she saw that he was extremely honest, but he wasn't a merchant by trade. He wasn't making money and earning money and counting it and doing the kind of things that merchants do. But Khadija was able to invest in the caravan, but she didn't actually go with it. So in a society like that, the social position of women will often be affected. And so when we look at Quraysh, we see that their women were incredible women, very intelligent, very gifted, very outspoken, but they didn't have that dominance that you had in the Muhajirin, in the Ansar women. The Ansar women could be very powerful. And often they're also big because many of the Ansar were tall people. They come originally from the Yemen, but they come from a part of Yemen in which a lot of the people were big. And there you have, among them we also have a famous woman whose name is Nusayba or Nasiba. And she was a big woman, very powerful. And in the Battle of Uhud, she is one of those who stood right by the Prophet. And she, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and she protected the Prophet in the Battle of Uhud. And sometimes riders would try to attack them, and she would hamstring the horse. That means she would cut the tendons of the back leg of the horse so the horse would collapse to the ground, and then she would dispatch the rider means she would kill the writer, dispatch him to hell or wherever he goes. And she did that many times. She was a big woman, a powerful woman, a very good woman, and the Prophet loved her. And in the Battle of Uhud, she fought next to the Prophet, along with her husband and along with her son. And not only did she fight, not only did she protect the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but in, can we call this a womanly way? She also brought cloth to bandage people and water to give them water. So while she was fighting, she was also nursing. She was also attending to the wounded. And when the Battle of Uhud was over, she was wounded very seriously, as a matter of fact. And the Prophet ﷺ would not go into his home in Medina until he knew that she was all right. And when they told him she's wounded, but inshallah she'll be all right, then he would go into his own house. And she continued to be one of the dominant women of Medina until the time of her death. In fact, in the caliphate of Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him, when he sent out the army of Khalid ibn al-Walid to fight against Musaylima al-Kadhab, Musaylima the false prophet, who was in central Arabia, in the area where you have today the capital of Riyadh. Nusayba went on that campaign, and Abu Bakr himself, radiallahu anhu, walked out with the army, and he told Khalid ibn al-Walid, who was the commander, he said, you take good care of Nusayba, and know who she is, and know her status, and treat her the way that she should be treated. So this is an amazing story, isn't it? And she fought against Musaylim al-Kadhab, and she lost her hand there. It was cut off. And she says, I don't know which was worse, having my hand cut off in battle, or having Khalid ibn Walid give me the cure. Because what he did is he took her arm and he cauterized it by putting it in boiling olive oil. He said, I think that the cure was worse than having my hand cut off. So we have these great women among the Sahaba. When you come out of that time, then there's a story that I'd like to tell you, and I tell it on the CD. It would be a good movie. And this is the story of Khawla bint al-Azwar. Khawla bint al-Azwar. Her grave is in Damascus, by the way. And I love this great woman, and I made it a point to go stand at her grave. Khawla, again, was a big woman. She was tall, she was strong. And she is in the campaigns of the companions that go to Syria to engage the Byzantines. And she goes in this campaign to keep the company of her brother. This is usually the way the women would be in the army. That the armies of the Sahaba and of those early generations, usually when the men go forth in a military campaign, they will take with them women folk. They will take their mothers or their sisters or their wives, possibly their daughters. But they usually take women folk who will help them, who will cook for them, who will take care of the sick, and who will do other things. And one of the things you have to remember is these women also could fight. They also know how to fight. So when it's necessary, they will fight. They will encourage the men to be courageous. In the case of Khawla bint al-Azwar, she is there in the army to keep the company of her beloved brother. And he is dirar, which is a name that means a person who causes other people harm. It's a kind of a Bedouin name. Bedouins like names like that, like I'll cause you harm, meaning if we fight, you're going to be in trouble. So her brother was Dirar, and he was big. And he fought without armor. He didn't wear, and I don't know how many of you have ever seen the mail, the armor that the Arabs wore in the early period. I've seen that. I've seen the mail of Imam al-Hassan and Imam Ali radiallahu anhum. It is really heavy. I don't know how they could wear it. And have you ever seen the swords they fought with? I don't know how they could pick them up. And we have an Aikido master here who I've been asking this question for years. How do you use a sword like this and not break your arm? Not break your wrist? They had a way to do it, but I don't know what that was. And in any case, their swords were big. And they also had spears. The Arab spear was usually almost like an arrow. It's got a thin shaft, and it would have a long blade on it like a spear. I think they used the spears more like swords. They probably didn't throw them very much. Dirar didn't wear armor. He didn't wear a helmet. And he was a frightening soldier. And when he fought the Byzantines, he basically could just attack them at will. He was so effective. He was so dangerous, using his sword, using a spear. Maybe he had other weapons like bow and arrow, but I don't know. And one of the things he did was that he didn't care about common soldiers. I mean to say by that he didn't want to hurt the ordinary soldier. This is actually a good battle technique. If we look at the Europeans, the Swiss, who were very good soldiers, that was the Swiss technique. I happen to be Swiss, so I'm proud of that. The Swiss were undefeated for 300 years. Undefeated for 300 years. And the Swiss, when they fight, they only go for the leaders. They say, other people, just get out of our way. But, they'll go right to the king or right to the prince. Dirar was like that too. So Dirar went right to the head of the Byzantine army, who was the son of Heraclius, the Byzantine emperor, and he dispatched him, to use that word. Dispatched him to wherever he goes. And once he did that, then the Byzantines caught him. Okay, they overwhelmed him. And they took him as a prisoner. So Dirar doesn't come home for dinner. And when he doesn't come home for dinner, then Khawla is brokenhearted, because that's her brother. That's her brother. And we have poetry, the poetry of Khawla, who's saying, where is my brother? Who's seen my brother? Is he dead or is he alive? Was he taken captive? What? I have to know. It's very beautiful poetry. It might make you cry if you read it. And the Arabs love poetry, and they love to express themselves in poetry. But the next day, Khawla is not crying. The next day, she puts on armor. And she puts on black armor. That's why I call her the Black Knight. And then, to conceal her identity, so you don't know she's a woman, she puts on a veil. Because the Arabs actually didn't, the veil was not distinctively for women. And therefore she'll veil her face so that no one knows who she is, and so they don't know she's a woman. And the veiling of women, the exclusion of women from society, that's really not part of the prophetic society, nor is it part of the Umayyad society. It's a custom that develops in the Abbasid period. And it's taken primarily from the Persians, and also from the Greeks, because the Greeks did that too. So Khawla puts on a niqab, not so that you'd know that she's a woman and you don't look at her face. I don't know if her face was beautiful or frightening. I don't know. But Khawla then fights just like her brother. And she fights by herself. And she terrifies the Byzantines. And what's she doing? She's doing jihad, but she's actually trying to find her brother. She wants to know if he's dead or alive. And the Muslims are astounded by Khawla. And they all want to know, who is that batal? Who is that hero? Not who is that heroine, who is that hero? And of course, what's really important is what tribe does he belong to? Because if he belongs to my tribe, I've got some poetry tonight. That's the way they were. So they all say, like, who is he? Who is he? And Khalid is calling him and saying, come with us. And Khalid actually tries to catch her. Say, like, will you come join the army? Why are you fighting on your own? And he can't catch up with her. She's a horsewoman. She is a warrior. And she keeps plunging into the Byzantines. And they are terrified of her. They can't stand in front of her. So you can say she is the equal of Khalid ibn al-Walid, who has no equal among men. But if he did have an equal, it would be Khawla among women. And then finally, Khawla, let's say finally Khalid, he catches up with Khawla. And he says to him, he says, words to the effect of like, I happen to be the commander of the army, and it would be really good if you would fight with us, and it's not a one-man show. And then he says, I was startled to hear under the niqab the voice of a woman. And so Khalid asks her to explain her, and she said, I am the sister of Dirar. And Dirar was lost in battle. And I have to find my brother. And Khalid says, and we can help you do that. And then Khalid puts her in charge, not in charge of the army, but he puts her right in the front. He puts her, she is the attacker. And when the Byzantines see the army coming with Khawla in the front, whom they think is a man, it wouldn't necessarily help them if they knew that she was a woman. Her sword's just as effective. But they are devastated, and the Muslims win a victory. And when the Muslims win a victory, of course, they take prisoners of war. And then Khalid asks the prisoners of war any word about Dirar. And of course, they have to describe Dirar, that this is a soldier who fought without armor, and he was fighting mostly on his own, and he's the one who killed the emperor's son. And so it doesn't take long before they find out that he was taken prisoner, and he is being marched to Constantinople, which centuries later will be Istanbul. And of course, he will be taken care of in Istanbul, in Constantinople. He killed the emperor's son. And so Khalid says, let's put together a party and let's rescue him. And Khawla says, and do you mind if I come? And he says, absolutely not. You're honored to come. And so this party of a number of soldiers, including Khawla, they set out to intercept that party that's taking Dirar as a prisoner in chains to Constantinople. Who does the scouting? Who does the tracking? Khawla. She's a Bedouin woman. So she actually is the one who discovers where they are, how they went, follow this path. And then finally she comes to Khalid, because she'll ride ahead. And she said, we are now ahead of them. They're coming. And Khalid has her lead the attack. And they save her brother. They're able to rescue her brother. It was not a good day for the Byzantine party who had dirar, but they get dirar back. And then, of course, Khawla has her poetry about finding her brother again and how happy she is. Is that a nice story? I think it's beautiful, and it's not the only story. Because on another occasion, Khawla is taken prisoner herself. And in this case, excuse me, in this case, because again, the Muslim army will always have women in it. And these women, as you know, they're going to be mostly mothers, wives, and daughters. They're going to have a kinship relationship with somebody in the army. And they will fight. If the men begin to lose, the women fight, they join. But in this case, the Byzantines are able to capture a number of the women. And so they get hundreds of women. And it happens that one of those is Khawla. That's not good news for the Byzantines. But they don't know that. And so the Byzantines then, they've got the women as prisoners of war. And the women are talking in the camp. Most of them are Yemeni women. Most of them are from that southern part of Hadramaut, where a lot of you and your ancestors come from too. And so Khawla is saying to them, so women, you're content to be slaves? You're content to be slave women, to be taken back to Byzantium and be sold in the market? And one of them says that, of course, we don't want to be that. We want to be free. But it would be nice if we have weapons. We don't have any weapons. And she said, you don't have weapons? She said, you don't have tents? You don't have tent poles? I mean, listen to this, because it's like you've got weapons, you've got tent poles. Your tents are being held up by poles. And so she organizes the women. And she takes one of the biggest tent poles. And she says, we will break out at nighttime. She said, you'll see that the Byzantines, the Romans, have got their weapons stacked together. So she said, break those weapons. Break them in two if you can. And then she says, she and some other women, if they are attacked by the men, which they will be, then they will fight them with the tent poles. That's what she does. And she liberates all those women. So these are stories from our history. Khawla is in Damascus, right? You probably didn't know that, Rina, did you? But this young lady is from Damascus, and may God deliver the Syrian cities. May God bless the Syrian cities. May God remove this horrible tribulation. But these are just some of the stories, and we have others like that. One of the stories that I'd like to tell also is the story of Fatima al-Fihriya. Women in Islam were often the wealthiest of all people. And the reason for that, which is well known, is that women, as a rule, don't bear financial responsibility. A woman may indeed support her husband and help her husband, and many of you do that for your husbands. And often in our families, the wife works, the husband works. But technically speaking, in Islamic law, the responsibility is the husband's responsibility. So, there are structures of support that go through the society, and when we study Islamic law, those fall. 5 minutes? I thought I had another 30 minutes. But they have structures of support. The men have to support. But women usually don't have to do that. And of course, women receive inheritance, not identical to the inheritance of men, because they don't have the same responsibilities. You know, their money often will be their own, whereas a man's money often will not be his own. So we have many wealthy women in Islamic history. And many of these women are extremely great benefactors. So this is another chapter that we talk about in Famous Women, the women benefactors. You have great women in Damascus, again, to talk about your wonderful city, who built beautiful mosques. And usually everything we did in Islamic civilization was endowment-based. Endowments are very important. And we built a civilization on endowments. But if you look at, for example, one of the great mosques of Syria, it was a beautiful mosque. But the woman who built it and endowed it, she also made stipulations about things like who would give the Friday prayer. And that his khutbah had to be eloquent, and it had to be relevant, and it had to be beneficial. It's really interesting to read that. But Fatima al-Fihriya, she's one of those early figures in Moroccan history. She lived in the city of Fas, and she was very wealthy. She had inherited from a number of male and female relatives, and she just had a lot of money. And so what did she decide to do with it? She decided to build, as this wonderful lady knows, Al-Qarawiyyin. Al-Qarawiyyin, one of the greatest mosques and universities in Islamic history. And it's really amazing how she did that, because she supervised that from the very beginning. And not only that, she stipulated that only the halal would be used in that mosque. And what she had was halal. Her inheritance was halal. The land that she bought for the mosque was halal. And she insisted that the mosque be built from stones that were taken right from that earth. And she began to fast from the first day when they began building, and she fasted until the mosque was completed. And that mosque is one of the blessed, beautiful architectural feats of Islamic history, but also one of the greatest of all of our institutions. But don't you agree with me that the greatness of that institution also has to do with the piety of that woman and her greatness? And we have many women like that in Islamic history, but I've only got 10 minutes left. Two. Okay, so let's end with another woman. And again, if you get Famous Women, I hope you enjoy it. And I would love to have your criticisms, and I'd love to have your suggestions, and especially the great women, of Islamic history. And I know myself, even in Al-Andalus and in Morocco, there are now documentaries being made of great women that I knew nothing about whatsoever. And some of these, like our wonderful sister Juju, she's doing what I hope will be a beautiful documentary. I hope you don't mind me mentioning it. She doesn't like that at all, but anyway, but they are also doing incredible artwork and other things to present these women. But let's talk about a woman who lived in the days of Nuruddin Zengi. And she was the personal counselor of Nuruddin Zengi, who led that jihad in which Salah ad-Din would be so prominent. And this is a woman who was the most beautiful woman on earth in her time. That's what they knew her as. Her name was Fatima bint Muhammad, and she's from the city of Halab in Syria. And we're just told that she's the most beautiful woman on earth. That's what people said. And the kings wanted to marry her. The princes wanted to marry her, and she wouldn't marry them. And instead she married a man whose name is Al-Kasani or Al-Kashani. And he is one of the greatest of the Hanafi fuqaha. And he has a great book called Bada'i'u as-Sana'i', which is about miraculous things, miraculous achievements, miraculous constructions. It's about fiqh. And it's one of the great Hanafi works of fiqh. And it's also got a lot of really profound jurisprudence in it. But the main book here was her father's book. Her father was one of the greatest scholars of the time, and she was an even greater scholar. That's why I mention her. Because she is one of those examples of a woman who is politically astute. So politically astute that the king and the general, Nuruddin Zengi, counsels her. He asks for counsel. She knows what ought to be done. Very wise woman. But in terms of scholarship, she had no peer. She was a master of fiqh and of fatwa and of hadith and of Quran and of every Islamic science. And people came from all over the world, men and women, to study with her. And Kasani loved her so much. I mean, if you're married to the most beautiful woman on earth, I mean, well, you're very fortunate, But he loved her with a love that really cannot be expressed. And that's because also she married him because he wrote a commentary on her father's book. And that commentary is so great, she said, that will be your dowry. You can marry me. The kings can't marry her, the princes can't marry her, but this great scholar did. And for a long time, her father was living, and she and her husband, and Al-Kasani would never give a fatwa, but that her father would sign it first, and she would sign it second, and he would sign it last. When her father died, she would sign it first, and he would sign it second. So she is one of the incredible women of knowledge, and we have many of those, and now our time is out. But the muhaddithat, the women of hadith, this is one of the most common accomplishments of women scholars, that we have here thousands of women who were masters of hadith, who loved the hadith of the Prophet. And many of our best transmissions of hadith, our most accurate transmissions of Bukhari and of other books of hadith, they come through women. Karima bint Ahmad is one of the famous ones. And Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani is so proud of the fact that he was able to get the transmission of Karima bint Ahmad. And one of the things we have to say about the woman muhaddiths is that none of them is on record as being a liar or a fabricator. Isn't that amazing? None of them's on record for that. And if we look at the women scholars as well, I don't know of a single one who is on record for being, a scholar of dubious credentials, who is selling their knowledge short. As a rule, they go down as very dignified people, women of great integrity. And here in hadith, not only do you have some of the best transmissions among women, but we never have the case of a woman going down as a liar who fabricated hadith, who altered them. Unfortunately, we have a lot of men in that club, but we don't have any women at all. So we have this great legacy of great women scholars. And today, more than ever, we need to have the woman's voice. And many of you have already done that. Our Dr. Tatiana, other great women that you have here in Malaysia and elsewhere. And this is very, very important because the woman's voice is also authoritative. And the woman's voice often adds dimensions that you're never likely to get from men. It tends to balance things out. And may we meet again and actually talk about the great women of Nusantara. I wish that I knew about them, I really do, but I have to wait till Juju makes her film. اللهم وفقنا لما تحبه وترضى واجعلنا من عبيدك السعداء وأمتنا على كلمة الهدى علمنا ما ينفعنا ووفقنا للعمل بما علمتنا به واجعل ما نحن فيه خالصا مخلصا لوجهك الكريم يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا بعده تفرقا معصوما لا شقيا منا ولا محروما. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. There's a lot to say, and we have to be careful to speak the truth and to be very careful not to offend people. But in many Muslim societies today, the status of the societies is not good. The ignorance is great. The corruption is great. It's as if the societies are falling apart. And show me a single one of those societies in which women are honored and promoted. Usually these societies will be societies which may even oppose the education of women and use violence to stop that. If you don't educate your women, who will be the mother of your children? Who will be your grandmother? And one of the greatest blessings we can have in life is to have mothers and grandmothers and aunts, who are guides and lights for us. That's what they're meant to be. How can they be that if they're not educated? And they have to be not only educated, but they should also be competing to be scholars and at the highest ranks, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. When we educate our women, then we have educated women to raise our children also, and mothers and grandmothers and aunts and others, and that is extremely important. And when you find a society in which the women are honored, and in which the women are properly educated, then you see what kind of children come out of that society. And then also see how corrupt those children are going to be. That there are connections between all of these things. Many of our Muslim societies today are sick. And may God heal them. May He enable us to heal them. But part of that healing is restoration of women to their rightful position. And this is an opinion that I hold. Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, I think he wouldn't mind if I say that he holds that position as well. And I think in this time also, given the nature of our societies and our institutions, maybe we can produce those women scholars in numbers that are very significant, that take their place alongside the men. And also, when you don't balance this out, if you don't give women their rightful position, there will be reactions. There will be reactions. And we are the middle nation. We like to keep things balanced. We like to keep things in harmony. And this means give everything its due, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. This is also part of your tradition in Nusantara. That you are people that honor women, at least you have a past of that. And this is something of very, very great importance. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Am I finished?
Are you?
I don't know. Can I go sit?
No, please.
Huh? Oh, stay here. Okay. Okay.
After Tatiana will join you.
Sorry? Okay, yeah. Татьяна, спасибо. Пожалуйста.
So now that we've heard, mashallah, the amazing reminder of the power of the female voice and female scholarship, Q&A session has begun. Please feel free to raise your hand for the microphone, or you can write down your question and pass it to the Embara ushers.
Yeah, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Umar Haris from University Islam Malaysia. First of all, thank you very much for the talk.
Thank you very much.
I definitely learned a lot from it. I think my question is brief but might be a bit philosophical, so bear with me. In my university, we have many excellent women, many excellent students who have done master and then pursued PhD. But I think there's a trend where these women, where they came out from our university and we tried to follow up them, not all of them actually went into industry or into a high position in academia, and we've seen that many people say that for women to be in the real world, they had to give up their womanhood, because they've been asked to be treated like men. So obviously there's something wrong in how we go about trying to reach equality. So could you please comment on that, on how can we actually solve this issue?
Do I have to use this? So the question that our brother has raised about the difficulties that women often face in the business world, that's the way I'm interpreting the question. This is actually something that concerns women around the world, and certainly not just Muslim women. And in the feminist discourse of Europe in particular, the leading voices are fundamentally concerned with this issue, that the glass ceiling is never removed, and that women are asked to give up often very, very important things in their lives, like motherhood, for example, or to restrict that. But there are great obstacles that are put in their way in the business world. And despite all that's said about progress in this area, that progress actually may be very little. In my own country, the United States of America, and in Canada also, this is one of the issues which is brought up over and over again, that is there real progress there? And I don't know what you have in mind as an answer for that, but you know, women should be allowed, you know, to work in the proper circumstances, and you know, not to give up their womanhood, and not to be also put in a second-class position because of their gender. But this continues to be the case, you know, in Western societies just as it is in others, and it has become one of the major focuses of the discourse of women who talk about these things.
I just wanna
Please.
add a little bit. I think what to do, first of all, need to stop segregate society on gender criteria. Yeah? Not need to talk about man on woman in, for example, in university areas, professional area. Need to talk about the quality of professionals. You try to evaluate the person based on his professional ability. Because even we will make nowadays so many compliments to the woman. No, we need to educate women. Of course, we need to educate human, not only woman. You know, no need to separate these two things. You know, but this is my point of view anyway.
Thank you. Thank you. Easy questions. No difficult questions.
Assalamu alaikum.
I want to sleep tonight.
Thank you very much for the presentations to both. I just have two questions. Firstly, I think in Malaysia there is a lot of empowerment under women. For women has a lot of empowered facilities and rights here. However, I feel sometimes there's a lot of burden on women now, and I've seen this in a lot of cases where they are now both the money maker and the homemaker, and it's created an imbalance in households. I've seen a lot of women exhausted because they have to take care of the children, cook, and go to work with the same hours as men. So I think this is not a question, but also a message to men, that maybe there should also be an awareness of your responsibility as men. Second question is, I would like to know more about anything that you are doing for this for sister here, for about the conservation on the Quranic scripts that exist here in Malaysia. I understand it's under UTM, but is there something that we can do and not be part of UTM, but just as an outsider?
Thank you very much. If you allow me
please,
to
please.
answer, I don't want to give any comment for your first part of your question because I think I did already. Yeah, for me, it's no special issue of women in any of society. Yeah, it is an issue of the whole society. But anyway. About the conservation, we are lucky here in Malaysia because in Perpustakaan Negara Malaysia National Library, we have one of the very strong and high professional center of manuscripts, and they used to do a great job, and they try to conserve and take care of not only about Quranic manuscript, but the whole manuscript, the old manuscript as the whole. Yeah, and they have very good scholars over there, and they actually quite open. So any of you who is interested in it, you can go and look what they're doing actually. Yeah, that is. Unfortunately, that is also. I do care about. Unfortunately, here in Malaysia, not like maybe in Russia as well as USA. Libraries, continue to be empty. You know. I used to work in National Library more than 1 year, 1.5 years. I was writing some book for them, you know. And I see that very good collection in National Library. But people used to come only for assignments, students, or for reading comics and journals. And a huge collection of rare books, and including manuscripts, with open access, nobody comes. That is what you have to do with your children. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. One of the things that I'd like to say is that we live in the technological society. And this is, of course, one of the advantages that we have, and it's also one of the disadvantages. And we have to study the nature of that technological society. And we have to also see if there are things that we can do to modify it in a way that's beneficial for us, or to develop it in other ways that are beneficial for us. And one of the aspects of the technological society, whether it is here in Malaysia, or in Paris, or in America, or wherever it is, in China, is that it massifies the society. It creates masses. We of course use that word. But the massified society is a society in which organic units that are typical of traditional societies are broken up. One of these is the extended family. And then there are others, different types of conglomerations in the society, of a spiritual nature, of an ethnic nature. Those are broken up. So the technological society has to massify, and it's got to be able to move the people around as it needs them, so that for employment and other things, it will always have a workforce. And the nuclear family is part of this massification. I don't know to what degree in Malaysia your families are nuclear, because I know in the few families that I do know, that the extended family still has some reality. No doubt it doesn't have the reality that it had 100 years ago. But in the raising of children in particular, we have the famous statement that it takes a village to raise a child. And if you're able to go to traditional societies, and no doubt if you go to the Malay village, I've only been to one Malay village in my life, so I don't know much about them, but I'm sure this is true, or the Indonesian village. that there you have a whole village that raises the child. And the mother's role, amazingly, may be very minimal. You've got mothers, you've got grandmothers, you've got aunts, you've got nieces and cousins and nephews, you've got neighbors, and the children are playing all over the place. They're free to go to different places. People pick them up. People change their diapers if they need to be changed. So this is one of the problems of the technological society, that you have a nuclear family, and unfortunately the role that the woman has in that nuclear family is often superhuman. That she's the one, and this is not the case in all families, and I would agree with Dr. Tatiana that we should be more, we should distribute the work. The Prophet ﷺ helped his wives, and he took care of the family. He tried to help with everything, but a lot of men are not that way. And so often in the nuclear family, you find that the woman is doing almost everything. She's the one who sees that the house is cleaned, and in fact in Islamic law that's not her responsibility. She's the one who sees the food is cooked, and again, that's actually not her job. If she does it, that's wonderful. And she's the one who's raising the children. She's the one who's getting them, putting the peanut butter, putting the butter on the sandwiches and so forth, right? And so, we have these amazing mothers. My own mother was like that. What my mother did, I can't believe. Because she also was a professor. She also was a student, and she took care of the family. She took really good care of the family. And she baked bread every week, by the way. We had this wonderful Palestinian bread just the other day. My mother could give you some competition. My mother could cook, and the whole house would just smell of like a bakery. It was just, and she'd do that every weekend. That was one of the things she loved to do. And so we have to really give credit to the mothers and to the women in general. But this is another thing as we go forward, that how do we live in this technological society? And do we have to be massified like this? Is there some way that we can come back to create organic units, including extended families, that can survive in this economy? It's not easy, but we have to also be in charge of this. And one of the things about technology itself is the fact that it tends to dominate societies in ways that can be very frightening. Because technology has a logic of its own, and human beings rarely have any control over it. And as technology grows and grows, the groups that produce it become bigger and bigger. So that if you're working in technology, as no doubt many of you are, then usually you're just a spoke in the wheel. You may not even know what that project is that you are working on. If we look at one of the most unfortunate technological developments of the 20th century, which is the atom bomb, we call that the Manhattan Project in the United States. That involved thousands of people, thousands of men and women, top secret. Probably none of them, but less than half a dozen, knew what they were actually doing. And we don't even know if that half a dozen actually knew exactly what they were doing. They produced the atom bomb, which is horrific. Look what it did to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That's one of the most unfortunate events of the 20th century. But again, technology has that aspect that it is impersonal, it has a dynamic of its own. We have children today who are being raised by iPads and iPhones, and we all love them. We're all enamored with them. We become addicted to them. But what do they do to us? And then what will be the next version of the smartphone? My wife tells me, your phone is smarter than you, you shouldn't be using it. And it's doing all kinds of things. It's going through my photographs, it's making movies, it's like, I didn't ask you to do that, And she said, you should just turn it off, okay? This phone is smarter than you are. But what will the next smartphone be like in 10 years? And I know people, we have people in our community who are working in that area. And actually what they have to do is produce the technology of 10 years from now, so that the investment can be there, so that the company can be geared up for it to keep its head above the water and make profit at that time. And is the question of benefit or harm, good or evil, asked? Rarely, if ever. It's about profit, and even more than profit, it's about efficiency. So this is something very dangerous, and our technology, which benefits us tremendously. I mean, look, I can speak to all of you through the microphone. And we have, you know, the cars we drive, the airplanes we use, and so forth. But this is also bringing us to the eve of destruction. Destroying our environment, you know, what it's doing to us sociologically and psychologically, we really don't know. We really don't know. It is producing already diseases that we didn't have before, ailments that we never had before. So are we able as human beings, these intelligent animals, are we able to get control of this? Are we able to harness it? And many people who study technology would say that's almost impossible to do. It's almost impossible to do. So again, I think I just like to put that in your wonderful question, I'd like to put it in context. That we have to understand that the way we live today is so different from the way that our ancestors lived 100 years ago. And we don't want to go back to the past, we want to go into the future. But we have to understand, why are these things this way, and what's at stake here? And is there anything we can do about that?
Assalamualaikum, Sheikh. Thank you very much for the very insightful information about women in Islam. I would just like to ask you, with all due respect, what is your advice for a lady who is a businesswoman as she grows on the corporate ladder? You tend to find in our society today, not very many men like Rasulullah SAW will look at a lady like Khadija. You tend, as a woman, you tend to become more discerning and more selective in your choices. And as a man, probably a woman who is in that position of status, wealth, power, and things like that, is not looked upon favorably. So what would your advice be to that kind of lady?
Would you like to answer that question?
I already did, I think.
Okay, all right. So, first of all, I cannot answer that question for you in your society, because I'm just a visitor here. And I want to know more about you. I want to learn more about you. All right, Imam Afroz Ali does know a lot more about you than I do, but I can talk more about my society in the United States. I know more about that. I just don't know enough to speak. And if I do speak, I'm going to be talking about what I know in America, and I'm assuming to be similar here, but probably it's not. Certainly not 100%. So we have a similar problem in the United States and in Canada. And in the United States and Canada, we have many highly educated Muslim women. And many of them are very successful. They have businesses, they are lawyers, they are entrepreneurs, they are amazingly talented. Some of them are happily married, and they have husbands who respect them and honor them. And many of them may have troubles with their marriages. They may be divorced, for example. Some of them don't get married. And a lot of them would like to get married, but they just don't. And, they often feel that they're not welcomed into marriages. and often because they feel that they are overeducated. So I don't really know what's the most intelligent answer to that. We could talk about it. Men are often very threatened by women. Even though men have muscles, you know, and they're able to lift weights and they're able to do these amazing feats, but for some reason, men are often more threatened by women than by anything else. It's kind of a mystery for me. It may not be for you. But I think that this is also part of it, is that in training our children and raising our children, it's very important that there is a compatibility between the male and the female, so that the boy and the man and the man knows how to relate to women, and so that women also know how to relate to him. And this is why we have to always have a balance. Jahith, who is one of the great Islamic literary figures of the early period, he's of the Abbasid period, he's a master of the Arabic language, and he writes incredible things about misogyny, about the fear or the hatred of women in some men. And he writes a lot about the status of women that's amazing. And he also goes back and he says it wasn't this way before. In the in the Prophet's city, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in Medina, in his society, in the Umayyad period, he says the relations between men and women were much more natural. And he analyzes that in a way that is surprising. And the way he analyzes misogyny is also very, very insightful. But the fear that men can have of women. And so this has to also be overcome, you know, that, and, you know, respect for women. If you're raised by educated women, then are you going to disrespect an educated woman? I doubt that. You see your own mother in her. So there are a lot of things here, and I think a lot of men, they really feel they have to dominate their wives, they have to control their wives, and they will try to do that, and often they fail in that. It leads to a lot of the problems that we have in marriage. But hopefully we will learn to honor and respect our sisters who are educated and successful, not to feel threatened by them, and to be able to, we have a big problem in my society in particular with the marriage of Muslim women. We have so many who are unmarried and who want to be married, but they can't find a spouse. And this is a big problem. I wish I had the silver bullet, you know, that kills the beast and solves the problem, but I don't have that. Baraka Blue, do you have any insight? You don't have a poem on that? Are you going to work on one? Okay. How about you, Sidi? Inshallah, Allah bless you all and bless your marriages. And those who are not married, may He give them good marriages. And, you know, again, you want to raise good children. You want your children to be like the best they can be. Then love your spouse. And you cultivate that love. You know, often our marriages begin very blissfully, and those are days we soon forget. They happen to be the most beautiful days of our lives. There's nothing like that. But then the arguments, the disagreements, the discord, and then we turn our backs on that as if it never was. We stab ourselves in our own hearts. We put out our own eyes. But it's very important, you know, to maintain that tie between husband and wife and to cultivate that tie. And there's nothing you do that is better for you than to cultivate the relationship with your spouse. And one of our beloved teachers, Hakim Archuleta, who has benefited me so much in my life I can never pay him back. But he says he's very good as a marriage counselor. And he cites a poem that I cite, and it is, "My father and mother are two streams that come together in my heart. And this means that when the spouses love, the mother and father love each other, they respect each other. That what's really harmful is when the respect goes. When we disdain the spouse. This is extremely harmful. Disdain, it's worse, than anger 1,000 times. And this hurts your children immensely. It doesn't mean that they won't survive, because human beings are tough. They can survive the worst of situations. But the ideal situation is like Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve, he is the caliph of God on earth. Where's his caliphate? He didn't have a Baghdad. He didn't have a Damascus. He had a beautiful wife who is our mother. And he had wonderful children. And of course there was also the first two, and that wasn't wonderful. But after that, it was a beautiful story. And Adam loved his wife more than you can imagine. And she loved him more than you can imagine. And this was the inheritance of those first generations, who are the best of all. السابقون المقربون ثلة من الأولين وقليل من الآخرين. There were a lot of them in the early generations, and that also is a reflection of this healthy family, of the wife and the husband who truly honor and love each other. And the children are the greatest beneficiaries. If my mother loves my father, and my father loves my mother, I'm the richest kid in town. And it doesn't matter if I don't have toys. And it doesn't matter if there's not much food on the plate. But when my mother and father disdain each other, I'm the poorest kid in town. And it doesn't matter if I have nothing but toys and nothing but a big house. It's not going to compensate for that. So, we have to work on each other. The spiritual aspect of Islam is always about our personal development, getting rid of the contradictions, working them out, dealing with ourselves. And marriage is one of the most important parts of our life. And may God bless our marriages, and that's the foundation of our civilization. And may He also protect our marriages in the age of massification and the nuclear family.
We have time for one last question.
Assalamualaikum. I am in the belief that society in general is very discriminative against women. But it seems that Islam is especially scrutinized in its questions of women's rights, or lack thereof. And it is sadly a justifiable occurrence.
Do you have a question or a statement?
I do, yes.
Yeah.
How did this violation of women's rights within Islamic societies begin to occur? Because it is very popularly discussed and scrutinized by Western medias and the populations across the world. And one agenda that keeps being brought up, which I believe to be a cultural one, is the female circumcision, or some people in the West call female genital mutilation, which sounds very violating, to be honest. How did it begin, this perception of Islam as very, very discriminative of women? And when did this culture of female circumcision start becoming as an occurrence of an Islamic occurrence? Thank you.
There's a lot of emotion in that. There is a lot of journalism in that. And a lot of assertions, which are things based on things that we find that are reported. Are these true? Are they not true? This is something that we have to talk about. The issue of female circumcision is an issue that has been raised by certain health groups. I presume that there are things like that that happen in particular parts of the world, like maybe Sudan, maybe parts of Ethiopia. What I've heard is horrific. It has nothing whatsoever to do with Islam and nothing whatsoever to do with the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Most parts of the Muslim world are completely free of anything like that, and they would not tolerate that to happen. I mean, the things that I've heard of, again, I don't know where that happens. I believe it happens particularly in East Africa, but these are horrific stories. And to put them out as if we all do that, well, that's simply not the case. That's not the case at all. And that's not the teaching of the Prophet ﷺ. Again, the role of women in Islam. You know, no civilization on earth until modern times has produced as many great, illustrious women as Islamic civilization has. And this is one of the reasons why I produced what I did, Famous Women in Islam. That our women were not written off throughout our history. No doubt there are Muslim societies today in which patriarchy strangles and suffocates women. But that is not the norm throughout our history. And usually in the Islamic world, you have matriarchs that are right there by the patriarchs. We have some sitting here in the audience. And if you go to West Africa, for example, where Islam has rich and ancient traditions, the typical African village has men elders and women elders. And don't think for a minute that the men are the ones who call the shots. The women are just as authoritative. In fact, in West Africa, the way that children are raised is a way that's designed to empower women and to protect women. And, you know, so we have to be very careful about these generalizations. A lot of these are false universals. They have propaganda value of the first order, especially in a time when Islam is being painted as an anti-civilizational force, which it's not. We are the creators of civilization throughout history. Wherever we went, we created civilizations. We didn't destroy them. And women were a fundamental part of that. So the first thing we want to know is what is true and what's not. And you know, in the Chinese traditions and in other traditions, we are always admonished that be careful about what you say. And be careful about repeating what you hear. First, we have to know, is it true? The Chinese tell us that, ancient Chinese teachings. Like, be careful that what you say is true. And then also, is it harmful? Will it bring harm to other people? And then, is it beneficial? One of the greatest women in Islamic history is the great Zubaydah, who was the wife of Harun al-Rashid. One of the most dominant women in all history. You know, she is a woman who, if you think Elizabeth I of England was something, then look at Zubaydah. And this woman also stood up for women. Aisha did as well. So we have that tradition, and it's very important for us to get the record straight and to get the record right, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. The idea that the West is the only civilization that really cared about women. I mean, this is really a fallacy of the first order. And in fact, I mean, women couldn't vote in France, and they couldn't inherit in France, and in many European countries until very, very recently. So, inshallah, may we be able to diffuse the prejudices. And also, we Muslims, we bear as much responsibility here as anyone, because we don't tell our story. And you have to tell our story. And we've got beautiful stories to tell. And we have to tell about our history, we have to tell about our great women, we have to tell about our great accomplishments, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, and not in a triumphalist spirit, but simply to do justice to the past, and hopefully also to build a future. Are we finished? And God bless you for your question. I hope that my answer will be of some benefit.
Unfortunately, tonight has come to an end. Thank you, Dr. Umar and Professor Dr. Tatiana, for your knowledge and your wisdom. Make dua, we implement what you teach.
Astaghfirullah.
Well, we have 3 more talks coming up from Bara. Please come to Saturday morning. It's at 9:30 a.m. called Why Religion Matters. That's relevant. 10 a.m. on Sunday, The Beautiful Soul, Traversing the End of Times. And Sunday night, The Nobility of Men and Women in the Light of Islamic Chivalry. So please come, tell your friends, tell your family. It's time for us to know our stories so we can tell them. So on behalf of Mbara, I'd like to thank you all for coming out. Thank you again to our beautiful scholars and teachers. Thank you to the mom-in-laws who are helping with our babies in the background. Thank you all again for coming. Assalamu alaikum.